His name was Jesse Livermore, and in 1929, as the American dream crumbled into dust, he made $100 million. He was the man who shorted the market before the Great Depression, a trader so legendary they called him the Boy Plunger and the Great Bear of Wall Street. Yet, while names like Rockefeller and Carnegie are etched into the stone of American history, his is barely a whisper. He bet against America during its darkest economic hour and won a fortune equivalent to billions today. But this isn't just a story about a brilliant trade. It's the story of a man who built a secret intelligence network that allowed him to see what no one else could, or perhaps what no one else wanted to see. While a nation danced on the edge of a cliff, he was calculating the depth of the fall. This is the story of how one man crippled America and why you've never heard his name. The story of Jesse Livermore doesn't begin in a lavish Wall Street office or a prestigious university. It begins in a dusty, smoke-filled bucket shop in Boston. At just 14 years old, with $5 in his pocket and a rebellious spirit, he ran away from his family's farm in Massachusetts, escaping a future his father had planned for him. A life of manual labor he desperately wanted to avoid. He found work as a board boy, his job being to chalk up the ever-changing stock and commodity prices on a large blackboard for the gamblers, or customers, of the brokerage. These weren't legitimate exchanges. They were betting parlors where people wagered on stock movements without actually owning any shares. For a young Jesse, it was a baptism by fire into the chaotic world of finance. Most boys in his position would have seen only a blur of numbers, a meaningless stream of data. But Livermore saw something different. Day after day, he meticulously recorded these movements in a small notebook, his own secret ledger of the market's pulse. He realized that past price action could be a powerful predictor of future behavior. Before long, he wasn't just chalking up the numbers, he was betting on them. He'd place his small wagers using the patterns he'd identified in his notebook, and almost immediately, he started winning. The older, more experienced traders mocked him, calling him the Boy Plunger for his audacious bets. But their laughter faded as his small pile of cash grew. By the time he was 15, he had made his first $1,000, a small fortune at the turn of the 20th century. He was no longer just a board boy. He was a market savant, a prodigy who could read the tape like a composer reads music. His success, however, came at a price. The bucket shops, which profited from their customers' losses, soon grew tired of paying him. They banned him, one by one, across Boston. Forced to find a new hunting ground, Livermore set his sights on the ultimate arena, Wall Street. He arrived in New York City with his winnings, ready to apply his pattern-reading skills to the real market. But Wall Street was a different beast. The information was slower, the tape was delayed, and the scale was infinitely larger. His old system, built on the instant feedback of the bucket shops, failed him. He lost everything, multiple times. But each failure was a lesson. He learned that numbers alone weren't enough. He needed something more. He needed to understand the human element, the fear, the greed, the hope that truly moved the markets. He needed to build an edge that no one else had. As America plunged headfirst into the hedonism of the Roaring '20s, a decade of unprecedented prosperity and cultural excess, Jesse Livermore was quietly building his empire of information. The stock market was a national obsession, a one-way ticket to riches for anyone with a few dollars to spare. Shoeshine boys gave stock tips, and housewives gambled their savings on hot new companies. The market only went up. But Livermore, seasoned by his past failures, was deeply skeptical of the euphoria. He knew that markets driven by pure emotion were inherently unstable. To see the truth behind the ticker tape, he cultivated a sophisticated, clandestine network of informants. This wasn't a formal organization, but a carefully curated web of personal connections that spanned the breadth of the American economy. His network was his secret weapon. He had sources inside major brokerages who could tell him not just what was being traded, but who was trading it and in what volume. He developed relationships with industrial magnates, getting first-hand accounts of production levels, inventory buildups, and consumer demand. He spoke to railroad executives about shipping volumes and crop brokers about harvest yields. Each piece of information was a tile in a grand mosaic he was assembling. While other traders were reacting to the headlines in the morning paper, Livermore was getting the news before it was even written. He operated from a luxurious, custom-designed office, complete with a private stock ticker and a bank of silent telephones connecting him to his sources. It was a fortress of solitude and information, insulated from the noise and irrational exuberance of the street. Through this network, Livermore began to spot the cracks in the foundation of the Roaring Twenties. He saw that the market's meteoric rise was being fueled not by genuine economic growth, but by massive amounts of debt and leverage. He noticed that while the prices of leading stocks were still climbing, the broader market was faltering, a classic sign of a topping market. His informants told him of slowing industrial production and warehouses overflowing with unsold goods. The frantic buying was no longer based on value. It was a pyramid scheme of hope, with everyone praying they could sell to a greater fool before the music stopped. Livermore recognized the warning signs because he wasn't just looking at the numbers. He was listening to the whispers from the heart of the American economy. While the nation celebrated, he was quietly, methodically, preparing for the collapse he knew was coming. October 29, 1929. Black Tuesday. The day the music stopped. Panic gripped Wall Street as a tidal wave of sell orders flooded the exchange. Fortunes that had taken a lifetime to build were wiped out in a matter of hours. Ticker tapes fell so far behind they became useless, broadcasting ancient history as the present disintegrated. The dream of the Roaring Twenties died a violent, public death. Brokers wept openly on the floor of the stock exchange. Stories, both true and apocryphal, spread of ruined investors leaping from the windows of their high-rise offices. America was losing everything. But in his secluded, quiet office, far from the pandemonium, Jesse Livermore was having the single greatest trading day of his life. While others had been buying with reckless abandon, Livermore had been strategically accumulating massive short positions. Shorting is essentially a bet that a stock's price will go down. He had borrowed shares of key companies and sold them, with the intention of buying them back later at a much lower price and pocketing the difference. It was a contrarian, incredibly risky strategy. If the market had continued its upward climb, he would have been ruined. But his intelligence network and his unparalleled feel for the market's psychology told him the end was near. On Black Tuesday, as prices plummeted, the value of his short positions soared. With each tick down, his net worth climbed by millions. When the closing bell finally rang, silencing the screams and the chaos, Jesse Livermore was worth over $100 million. In today's money, that's billions. He had stared into the abyss of a national catastrophe and emerged as the richest man on Wall Street. The aftermath was a stark, moral paradox. Livermore became a pariah, a scapegoat for a nation in mourning. He was the Great Bear, the man who had profited from their collective misery. He received death threats and was publicly blamed for deepening the crash. The truth, of course, was far more complex. Livermore hadn't caused the crash. He had simply been the one person who saw it coming and had the courage to act on his convictions. He was a speculator, and his role was to identify and profit from inefficiencies in the market. And the biggest inefficiency of the 1920s was the collective delusion that the party would never end. Yet, the image persisted. As millions lined up for bread, Livermore cashed in. He had won the game, but in doing so, he had become the villain in America's tragic story. The ultimate lesson of Jesse Livermore's life is not found in his greatest victory, but in what followed. He, the master of market cycles, somehow failed to see the cycles in his own life. After the 1929 crash, his discipline, the very trait that had made him a genius, began to fray. He made impulsive, emotional bets, listening to tips instead of his own analysis. Within just a few years of making his $100 million fortune, he had lost it all. The great bear of Wall Street was, once again, broke. His personal life mirrored his financial ruin. His immense wealth had brought him glamour and luxury, but it had not brought him peace. He went through a series of tumultuous marriages, his family life plagued by scandal and tragedy. He became a recluse, haunted by the ghosts of his past glories and failures. The man who could read the moods of the market with perfect clarity was completely unable to manage his own. The money, it turned out, was never the answer. It was just a way of keeping score in a game he was addicted to playing. The thrill wasn't in being rich, it was in being right. And when he was no longer right, he had nothing left. In 1940, in the cloakroom of a New York hotel, Jesse Livermore took his own life. He left behind a note in his well-worn trading notebook addressed to his wife. It read, "My dear Nina, can't help it. Things have been bad with me. I am tired of fighting. Can't go on any longer. I am truly sorry, but this is the only way out for me. Love, Lori." The man who had conquered Wall Street, who had made and lost fortunes that boggled the mind, ultimately saw himself as a failure. His story is a chilling, cautionary tale, a testament to the fact that you can win the whole world and still lose yourself.